Director of San Jose Public Library, and I am a librarian. So when I say hi, I always want lots of feedback. So I'm so happy to have you all here tonight in our beautiful Hillview Branch Library. I'm just gonna note that I think this is the first time that two City of San Jose commissions have ever had a joint special meeting. And we are here, yay, give yourselves a round of applause. And we are here for a really important city-wide initiative, which is the considering the final draft of the Children and Youth Services Master Plan, which will also be the first of its kind in San Jose. So you're going to hear from the experts in a moment, but I did want to note before we start that we do have interpretive services available in Spanish and Vietnamese. So if anybody would like those, just visit the table over here. And then secondly, I do want to just call out and thank our amazing administrative staff who help support the commissions and put all this together. And I want to thank Kathy Hunter. And there is Zim Wynn hiding. There she is. Carla Alvarez. Megan Malloy. Miss Megan. And Ann Grabowski over here, hiding in the corner. So before we kick off the official meeting, I also wanted to introduce a really special guest. You all know that we're here in the gorgeous Hillview Library. We're in the community, which is really important to us. And we are super lucky to have such a vocal and committed community advocate in our District 5 Councilmember Peter Ortiz.
Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here today for what Jill just said is the first joint meeting in San Jose's history of our commissions. You all are making history today to make sure that we are prioritizing our youth in the city of San Jose. Welcome to the East Side. My name is Peter Ortiz. I'm the council member here. It's an honor to represent this district, which is one of the most diverse districts, both culturally and economically in the city, right? Just to get, I know that some of the people here may know, like Anarita, who's my commissioner for library and education, or Andrew, who's also the commissioner, but for the youth commission. But for those who don't know about the East Side, we are essentially the cultural capital of the city. Just down the street, we have King and Story, which is the lowrider capital for Northern California. So much Chicano and immigrant and working class history has occurred here. And then also in the Mayfair neighborhood, that was ground zero for the farm worker union movement. It's also where Cesar Chavez lived and started his organizing at Our Lady of Guadalupe in McDonald Home, right? So we're on hollow ground. So many cultural movements, activist movements have started here. And I think that sets the foundation for the discussion. Because as already mentioned, the Children and Youth Master Plan has never been done in the city of San Jose. Right? And there are so many issues that affect our children outside of the classroom. Housing, right? Domestic violence, family members with drug addiction. All those things are occurring here on the East Side. And our schools are underfunding of schools. There's so many factors that are impacting our working class and the immigrant communities of color. But I'm proud to be part of a city who have come together, who's breaking down silos like we are doing today to make sure that we are delivering results for the families throughout the city. So I just want to thank you. Thank you for all the city workers here. Thank you to, of course, our librarian, but thank you for your public service. Because I know it's hard. You don't get paid as a commissioner, but you're here as volunteers putting the best interests of our community first. And I'm just really impressed with all our youth leaders here today. You are the future of our community. Who knows, you may be future council members. So stay involved and let's have a wonderful event today. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
All righty. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to call this meeting to order, correct? Where are we? Oh, okay. Okay, well, welcome, folks. Thank you again to our Youth Commission for joining the Library and Education Commission. My name is Jose Magana. I proudly am the chair of the Library and Education Commission. I've been on the commission since 2017, so really excited to have this be a first-time event for the city. As Councilmember Ortiz said, it's so important, not just as my experience as an educator, as an elected official, but as a parent, to have this conversation is super important. So really excited for that. So I will be calling to order our joint special meeting for the Library and Education Commission at 6:10. I believe we will now do the orders of the day, correct? So we can start with roll call.
Chair Magana,
Present.
Vice Chair Ramos,
Here.
Commissioner Banks,
Here.
Commissioner Westphal, Commissioner Reyes,
Present.
Commissioner Gardner, Commissioner Mendoza, Commissioner Jolly,
Here.
Commissioner Wendy, Commissioner Brown,
Present.
Commissioner Allen,
Here.
Commissioner Seller.
And Commissioner Wendy's on her way. She just let me know. So we'll move on now to the public record. Do we have any correspondence?
We do not.
Okay, then we'll move on to open forum. Do we have any speakers of open forum?
Well, we'll have a youth commission call, meeting to order, and then we will call the youth commission.
Thank you.
Yeah, so welcome everybody. I am Sheriff Fine and I'm really excited to be here and see this amazing report. So you'll probably order at 11 p.m. So the Acknowledged reporter is part of the city's policy on capturing important meetings and decision making process. So we have
So we'll run the roll call for youth commission. Chair, Vice Chair, Amanda, Commissioner Mishra, Commissioner Kumar, Commissioner Steele, Present, Commissioner Wu, Commissioner Wendell, Commissioner Megan Wu, Commissioner Megan Wu, Commissioner Gonzalez Nunez, Commissioner Singh, absent, Commissioner Denali.
If members of the public need interpretation, please indicate language on the card. For the people who require an interpreter, these comments will receive 5 minutes to allow for message and interpretation. Do you have any correspondence?
Not from the youth commission.
Not from Library Education Commission.
Do you have any members of the public who wish to speak on today's topic?
I do have one. Meredith, are you open forum or are you on the agenda? The agenda. So we don't have anyone else.
So we'll be moving on to the children and youth services.
Yes, the Library and Education Commission will also move on to the Children and Youth Services Master Plan.
Hi, everyone. I'm just gonna acknowledge while we get set up that we have Angel Rios, who is Deputy City Manager for the City of San Jose, who's gonna be here to kick us off, and also Laura Guzzo from the City Manager's Office, who have been working on the master plan.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's a real pleasure to be here. This is literally like coming home. Because I was actually born and raised, well, I wasn't born there, but I was raised literally across the street. This is, I think, 1600 Hopkins or I'm 1723 Hopkins. So I'm gonna go visit my sister right after this. So it's a real pleasure to be here. And I can't think of a better place to hold this meeting, right? Because one of there's so much, and you heard the council member speak to there's so much to be grateful for and so much to be proud about in terms of the east side. There's one statistic that is like my least favorite statistic in the entire world. Anybody who knows me knows what I'm going to say next, and that is that when you look at our jail system, when you look at our starting with the ranch all the way up to the prison system, that where San Jose youth are sent over to Stockton and the Central Valley area, there are 4 zip codes that are responsible for more than 75% of our incarcerated youth. And sadly, one of those zip codes is right here, 95122. And sadly, that statistic was true when I was a kid. And I'm already getting close to retirement, and it's still a fact, right? And so I just want to kind of point that out there because, I really think there's this tension between there's so much to be proud of here and yet so much more work to do, right? And I think that's a good segue for the Children and Youth Master Plan and why the Children and Youth Master Plan. And really, the idea of a Children and Youth Master Plan was really born from the pandemic, right? As we were responding to the pandemic, of course, the city, kicked into action in coordination with the county and so many nonprofits and so many, community groups. And the one thing that became very clear as we were kind of coming out of the pandemic, and we were hearing from school teachers and superintendents and parents and around the impact that the pandemic had on young people, right? And I'm talking not only, the learning loss, that was kind of like bad. But beyond that, there was impacts around mental health and mental well-being and feelings of increased social isolation, a lot of pent-up feelings and emotions and things like that. And so we started, as we started observing all these trends, feeling really concerned about it, we said, we need to do something different about, how we build back, right? We can't just build back the same way. And we also know that the pandemic didn't create these issues. They simply highlighted them, right? So it wasn't like they were a creation or a byproduct of the pandemic. They just highlighted them, and especially in communities that tend to be more impacted by poverty and where you have a lot of more entrenched, poverty issues. And initially we thought, okay, well, let's develop a master plan where we look at our city programs and we kind of like see how we could do better as a city. We kind of started there, and had we started and ended there, we would have had this plan done a long time ago. But what started happening is we started convening people. We started talking to young people. We reached out to over 1,000 youth. We reached out to over 1,100 parents and caregivers. We reached out to just about every nonprofit that touches this space. We engaged superintendents, teachers, social workers, the county, and so forth. And the more we engage with these different groups, the more we realize that if we're really going to make a difference, we're going to have to make systemic change. It's not going to be enough to just, okay, let's set up some OKRs and let's help 30 kids that are struggling. And, we're going to have to really scale, right? Otherwise, that statistic that I mentioned early on will just continue 20 years later, right? And so we decided to take the longer road, right? And right around that time, I think it's also important to give credit where credit's due. There was a few council members, Councilmember Magdalena Carrasco, who was council member at that time, Councilmember Sylvia Arenas, who was also, and both of them were also on the Neighborhood Services and Education Committee. And so they were really instrumental at a policy level, to champion this. And then inside the organization, people like Jill from the library and her team, John Cicerelli with Parks and Rec and his team. Of course, I stole Laura from Parks and Rec to help in the city manager's office. And then even as there was a political transition, we had Councilmember Ortiz come in, and it was like it was seamless because this was kind of like we didn't have to convince them of anything. It was like, no, let's go, right? So that's been really seamless. Before I turn it over, I want to kind of just highlight a couple of things. What you'll see in this document, and I believe you all should have received a link to this document. I want to kind of just give a little disclaimer. This is still a draft document subject. We're still editing literally as we go. We will be going to council on April 9th to present. It'll still be draft at that point, but it'll even look a little bit more different than this as we continue to just keep making iterations and keep, making sure that we're aligning community input with what is actually written in here. So I want to kind of just give you that caveat. But secondly, I want to kind of talk a little bit about like the focus. This document here really is intended to be a framework, right? It's not intended to be the panacea to everything, the cure-all to everything, to have all the objectives on every single youth issue. It's meant to really present a framework, establish a call to action, and to really be a galvanizer cross-sector, cross-system, right? City, county, nonprofits, everyone else, right? The business sector. And it's all centered around building a cradle to career pipeline, right? We hear about prison pipelines. We hear about all these other negative pipelines. This is all about how do we create what we call opportunity pathways for young people. If you come into the library to check out a book, maybe that's what brought you in here. But while you're here, then how do we plug you into a coding program? How do we also, maybe through conversation, find out that, maybe somebody in your family needs some additional help, that needs a mental health referral, where we can do that all under kind of like with the no wrong door approach. And so we try to operationalize that in this document. I want to call your attention to the subtext or the subtitle of this plan. So, Children and Youth Services Master Plan, that sounds pretty boring, right? Just that's the basic plan. But the subtitle is I think, was really catalyzed by community input. And the subtitle says, it's a plan to harness the power of hope and community action to forge opportunity pathways for San Jose's children, youth, and young adults. And we wanted to start there. We wanted to start aspirationally, right? Because we have a tendency, especially us in government, to kind of try to figure something out. Let's set the goals, objectives, and we go about doing our business. But sometimes we kind of get ahead of ourselves and we don't do the visioning part, right? What we want to do here is we want to turn on the hope switch for young people. We want every young person in our city to understand that they are loved, that they are valuable, and that they have a destiny and a purpose, regardless of your surname, regardless of your ethnic origin, regardless of anything. If you're a young person in San Jose, we want you to know that you have opportunity pathways. And what this plan aims to do is to really create that pipeline highway or freeway, for lack of a better term. But we also know that we also can't just start and end with aspiration, because that's all good, right? Pie in the sky, kind of talking, happy talk, that's all good. That's good to kind of get the conversation going, but we need to translate that into action, right? Specific, intentional action that'll make a difference in the lives of young people, not based on what we want for them, but based on what they want for themselves, right? And so that's why we merge these two areas of hope and then community action. And the operative word there is community action, because you notice we didn't just say the city, or we didn't just say the county, or we didn't just say schools, or just young people or older people and everybody in between. We're using the kind of the all-inclusive community term for that. And then together between hope and action, it's intentionally forging these opportunity pathways for young people, right? And so that's what we hope to accomplish with this. What I'll do at this point is turn it over to Laura to kind of walk you through some of the framework. We're over 130 pages now, so there's so much here. So we're going to give you the condensed version, right? But we'll give you a sense of kind of like the framework that we're proposing, the call to action that will come after that. And then also hopefully at the end, talk a little bit about how you could, if you're willing, help support us at council on April 9th when we take it to the full council. And more importantly, how you can get involved with helping us implement this going forward, because the work is really up ahead, right? So with that, before I turn it over to Laura, are there any questions for me in terms of just the master plan in general? You could also, we could also wait till the end if that makes sense. But let me turn it over to Laura, who has just been doing an amazing job on really kind of keeping this thing moving. So, Laura.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me and Angel here to present the Children's Youth Services Master Plan. Excuse me, but I'm going to go ahead and sit just so that I can balance my notes and the microphone, and also so you can see the screen. I'm just going to go off script a little bit and just say, like Angel, I'm here in my community. I used to visit the old Hillview Library and used to catch the bus at Mayer Elementary School. So to be here presenting the Children's Youth Services Master Plan is really literally a full circle of my life. So it's very exciting, and I'm honored to be here to share this with all of you. This is a collective process, which Angel had mentioned a little bit about that, and then I'll share more. So it's not just about one person working on this document, but it really is the result of many voices and many hands, physical hands touching the document throughout the process. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so just kind of to set, kind of ground us on why the Children's Youth Services Master Plan is important, and Angel mentioned it as well. But just again, want to reiterate that it was really important that we center the voices of San Jose children and youth that experience unsurmountable barriers and challenges that place them at risk or vulnerable to a number of negative influences, generational trauma, poverty, lower educational attainment, housing, instability, violence, and poor health outcomes. While we are fortunate to live in one of the wealthiest cities in the country, we also recognize that the gap widens for those that can participate and benefit in the burgeoning economy, and the many children, youth, and young adults that continue to be left behind throughout this prosperity of Silicon Valley. Our whole intent here is that we hope that we can learn from history and be innovative and strategic by bringing the county, city, and educational leaders, families, and youth, and community stakeholders together. Over the years, we know that the city has moved swiftly in advocating and addressing issues of homelessness, safety, blight, and economic development. We hear consistently from families and community stakeholders that it's equally important to elevate the needs and dreams of children and youth to the same degree and urgency and call to action. By centering the interests and needs of our youngest residents, we will see short and long-term impacts and benefits that will contribute to the vibrancy, economy, well-being, and future for all those who live, work, visit, and invest and do business in San Jose. And so as we began developing the Children's Youth Services Master Plan, we wanted to ensure that it provided a strategic framework and approach for children and youth from cradle to career. We wanted to make sure that we weren't doing this in isolation, as was mentioned, but that I provided guidance on policy priorities and investments, that we were really thinking about systems transformation, meaning how can we do this at looking at all the different systems, and that can be schools, that can be county departments, that can be housing, structural barriers, transportation, that it was beyond just delivering a service, that it's really looking at what are those barriers that prevent children, youth, and their families from accessing resources and supports. And then how do we ensure that we're providing a continuum of support throughout the developmental stage of young people? We know very well that what a 5-year-old needs may be very different from what a high school student or a young adult. And so how are we taking that into account? It's important that we look at long-term and sustainable impact and measurable outcomes, as Angel mentioned, making sure that we are moving the needle, but also recognizing that there is some tremendous work and valuable programs out there that are having outcomes and significant impact. And so how are we making sure that we're aligning with those? And that, as Angel mentioned, how are we doing this through a collective impact approach? Meaning, how are we we being all of us have a role in this process. Again, families, youth, schools, community-based organizations, the city, etc. And then more importantly, how are we doing this in an integrated service delivery approach? Meaning, as Angel mentioned, if someone walks into a library, a community center, and yes, they may come in for after-school tutoring or to access the computer, but then in conversation, library staff identify that that young person may need other resources and supports. How are we providing those opportunities for that young person to access those different resources? And then equally important as part of this process is ensuring that all of this is done in the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that we're sensitive to the intergenerational trauma of poverty that many of our families experience. And of course, again, as mentioned, that we're ensuring that we're really looking at the systemic racism and the systemic barriers and structural barriers that impede access to services. Next slide. And so as we've launched this process, we began in the spring of 2022 and started developing the timeline and all those different elements that we wanted to consider to design this. First important piece was community engagement, and Angel alluded to some of this, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but we really tried our best to have a holistic and comprehensive community engagement approach to this. I would say, did a very good effort in ensuring that we had community input and feedback on the findings throughout this process. It wasn't just a one-time thing or just a one point in time. And then we also wanted to make sure that we were learning also from existing literature, what are some best practices out there, but also some of the data that our own city departments and our county partners and community-based organizations have collected. And what are some of those other initiatives that we can align with, or that also we can leverage kind of that collective voice around those different themes. And then as we began drafting the document, we wanted to make sure again that we had some input throughout the process. We made sure that we had individuals from different entities review the actual draft of the master plan, as well as some of the action plans, again, to provide us input and feedback to make sure that we were going in the right direction, but also, again, to make sure that we were identifying those opportunities for alignment and leveraging of efforts. And then as part of that process, which we will talk a little bit more about, is planning for the demonstration sites, ensuring that we have an integrated and service delivery approach. Next slide. So as part of our community engagement efforts, we established advisories and committees of diverse representation. You'll see those reflected in the master plan currently. But again, families, youth, service providers, educational leaders, everything from elementary school to higher education, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, and city staff across different departments. We had focus groups, town halls, which I want to recognize the Youth Commission for helping us co-host a town hall at Educational Library Park. And we actually had one focus group here at Hillview Library. And then we also, with the support of the Youth Commission, hosted a virtual town hall citywide. And in addition, we had listening sessions. So we scheduled conversations with, again, different folks in the community to just listen and try to understand some of the experiences and just kind of the hopes and dreams that folks have for their own families, but also just for the community. And then we had a parent and caregiver and youth surveys. They were available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And so throughout this entire process, we were able to engage over 120 organizations, over 3,000 individuals, again, all of these different activities. And we had 33 focus groups. Next slide. And so you can imagine that was quite a bit of data to sift through, from the focus groups, the listening sessions, the surveys. And so as part of that process, we also engaged community to kind of have a clear understanding of what the data meant. And as we sifted through it and analyzed it, this was the vision that through community input we were able to draft. And so the vision is fostering a future where every child and youth in San Jose blossoms into healthy, resilient, self-sufficient adults, enriched with abundant opportunities to live, work, play, dream, and prosper within the vibrant landscape of Silicon Valley. And the unifying purpose is to create and expand opportunity pathways and supports from cradle to career that develop 21st century skills that lead to better health outcomes, sustainable employment, and a competitive living wage for San Jose children, youth, and young adults birth through age 24, particularly those most vulnerable. And we have been asked, well, why extend it to 24? And the reason, again, because we heard from community that young adults, whether they graduate from high school or not, or whether have already made a decision on their educational pathways, are still needing supports, whether it's through mentorship or family support, or just exploring and identifying educational pathways or career opportunities. And so we wanted to make sure that we really thought about that early adulthood where young people are still needing and wanting supports. And what also bubbled up through the different community input sessions was the importance of having guiding values, meaning that as we move this work forward, ensuring that we're doing this through this lens of values that we incorporate in every decision-making process. And so that's thinking about equity, accessibility and inclusion for all youth. And accessibility and inclusion means whether you have a disability to being able to access a library, for example, or if it's finances, being able to access an after-school program or tutoring support, or just being able to participate who you are as a person, regardless of how you identify yourself. Ensuring that every decision around designing programs and delivering services is outcomes and results driven. That we ensure that we have cross-sector collaboration and investment and accountability, as we mentioned earlier, just ensuring that all those that touch the lives of children, youth, and families are part of the decision-making process, and coordinating services across the community. And more importantly, through all of this is that it's youth and community driven. We can't design a program, a service, without having the voices of young people and the families in the decision-making process. Everything from design to implementation and even evaluation, making sure that we're being sensitive to their lived experiences. Next slide. So these strategic priority areas really bubbled up and were resonated across really every conversation we had, whether it was through focus groups or our surveys with young adults, with youth, with city staff and school leaders and community-based organizations. We consistently heard these themes that we later created into priority areas. And so the priority areas that surfaced was the importance of early learning and childcare. Families expressing that their child needs to have access to childcare, whether it's from infancy to preschool, and just recognizing the benefits that has, not only for the child, but for the family and the community. Health and wellness, health and mental wellness. I'm I'm sure this isn't news to many of you, but as Angel mentioned, this was even before the pandemic, but the pandemic really amplified the need for greater access to mental health services, to health services in a timely manner, but also access in that it doesn't require extensive transportation or cost, just something that families can access and use when they need it. Housing access and security. This is a thing that we heard consistently. What we heard from community was obviously not only affordable access to housing, but even more importantly was families are living paycheck to paycheck, or so much of their budget goes to housing that it doesn't allow them to provide other services or resources to their families, anything like after school tutoring or recreation, or families are investing so much of their work time just to make ends meet. The importance of learning and empowerment, and this really kind of cut across different areas, everything from the importance of youth graduating from high school. There's significant data that a child or youth economic mobility is really based on whether they graduate from high school or not. But also opportunities to just different learning items, everything from personal finances to understanding college applications or different career paths, and those educational pathways for that. Meaningful and sustaining jobs. Young people expressing the importance of being able to explore different career opportunities. Many youth express they don't have mentors in their lives, or they may have a mentor or a caring adult, but not anyone who can expose them to those different career opportunities. And also just understanding how do you even go about exploring different careers to begin thinking about their future. And the importance of having safe, clean, and connected communities. And this kind of ran a preview of different items, everything from young people feeling not feeling safe in their community, not being able to walk to their local park or library or even community center, or sometimes even just not having sufficient crosswalks to be able to cross the street safely to attend school, or having safe spaces where they can just gather and socialize with their peers or with their families or even their community members. And kind of the overarching theme that we heard a lot was around this notion around systems transformation that I mentioned about earlier, is really thinking about more than just providing services. It's how do we make sure that community partners are sitting together to really create a safety net for families, that regardless of whether that young person goes into a community center or a library or a school, that there's a network of support services that can touch and support that young person and their family. Next slide. So as we continue to design the Children and Youth Services Master Plan, as Angel mentioned, there's a lot of great work that has happened, and the city has done incredible, has passed incredible policies and initiatives and strategies. So it was important to make sure that as we designed the master plan, that it was also informed by this additional work. And I'll just highlight some of these. So the Youth Empowerment Alliance Strategic Plan, formerly the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force, has some objectives that align very well with what we heard from the community and what's included in the master plan. We had a couple of joint meetings with the County Board of Supervisors that also informed the design of the master plan, and also the Bill of Rights for Children, Youth, and Young Adults, as well as the audit report that provided recommendations on how we, the city, could make sure that we are implementing and adhering to the Bill of Rights, so that it's more than just being aspirational, but really being intentional about how it's incorporated. And then, of course, the educational digital literacy strategy that the library has done significant work and has made great strides in ensuring that we're elevating the quality of our program and services across departments and across that age continuum from story times all the way to after school programs. And in the mayor's June 2021 budget message, there was also some explicit direction around what the city could do to help support families and communities recover from the pandemic. And then also in April 2022, City Council approved 10.5 million of ARP or American Rescue Plan funds to support children and youth services. So some of that funding has been used to support the design of the master plan, and some of the remaining funds will support the work that follows. Next slide. So again, as we kind of continued on this journey of designing the Children and Youth Services Master Plan, we felt it was really important to understand just internally kind of the landscape of all those different children, youth, and family services and programs that we provide. And so we have done some initial mapping. And if you've seen the Children and Youth Services Master Plan, some of that is attached here at the end of the document. We've done some initial mapping of these key departments. There's more work to be done because it doesn't include all of the departments within the city of San Jose, but we definitely wanted to start with those departments that have robust children and youth services. And so I want to thank the library and our other departments who helped with this effort. And it was really eye-opening for all of us, I think, to kind of see what are all the different youth services, and then where do they fall around that age continuum? And so our next step as we're moving forward in this work is to also understand what is the landscape of program and services externally that are offered by our community-based organizations, our business partners, the private sector, the County of Santa Clara, the Santa Clara County Office of Education, school districts, and other educational entities, because again, we want to make sure that we're building that network, kind of building that web of support for families and children and youth. Next slide. And so from the very beginning, as we began designing the Children and Youth Services Master Plan, it became pretty apparent that we couldn't just have a document. So we didn't just want this to be a nice glossy document that then folk put away on their shelf and then maybe we revisit it every other year. We really wanted to make sure that we were also designing the structure and kind of the framework of how we could carry this work forward. And so we thought, what better way than to have demonstration sites that would allow us the opportunity to develop this at a smaller scale and be able to, in some ways, use it as a learning lab before we expand it to other communities, but also citywide. And so as part of that process, we identified with our community partners, with city staff, that it would be very important to focus in these two communities. One of them being the Poco Way with the attachment of the Mayfair community. And so the reason we say attachment is because if you think about kind of the geographic area, many of the partners live kind of within that area. The next demonstration community would be the Seven Trees Santee community. Again, very often those fall within kind of the same geographic service delivery area. And so the highlight of this I also want to note is that these two communities are within the San Jose Youth Empowerment Alliance priority neighborhoods, and they have been identified through various data surveys because they tend to have, while they have many assets and many strengths, they also experience a disproportionate number of challenges. And some of those, as we mentioned, just intergenerational poverty and trauma, increased system involvement, whether it's child welfare, juvenile justice, probation, youth and gang violence, housing instability, teen pregnancy, lower educational attainment, and then again, barriers to job, career, workforce development. And these communities have been historically marginalized and underserved. And so I also just want to add that we've been fortunate enough that the county has really stepped in as part of this effort and has committed to participate with us in this process, as well as Alum Rock Union School District, Franklin McKinley Elementary School, and Eastside Union High School. And so we're very excited because we're starting to build that network and that web of support for families and youth. Next slide. So again, recognizing that we can't do this alone, one, and two, it's important that community is involved at every level and at every structural process. And so we developed a teaming structure that we wanted to, again, make sure that we have a community leadership council representing the communities that are being served through these demonstration sites, as well as a youth leadership council. And also the community partners are sitting with families, with youth through this design process. We will have priority area work groups that align with the Children Youth Services Master Plan to make sure that we have experts in those fields supporting those work groups, but also any individual or family member or a young adult that wants to be part of that process can participate in one of these work groups that interests them. And so out of the demonstration sites, we also want to make sure that we have community partners who are the decision makers. It's one thing for young people or families to say, these systems are not being responsive to our needs. So how do we make sure that that information is being heard by our system leaders? And that could be a school district, or that can be the county, or it could be the city of San Jose, to make sure that we have those system leaders at the table as well. And so again, kind of through this hierarchy is how do we make sure that those challenges, those barriers, those concerns are being raised to these different governing bodies and policymakers. And then here to the left, again, is how do we make sure that we're leveraging collaborative efforts that exist, that we're leveraging resources and opportunities. This is going to take all hands on deck. It's going to require diverse community partners. And so how are we making sure that we are leveraging existing partnerships and work? Next. And so our next steps, as I mentioned, we will continue to do some of the city programs, services mapping process. We will begin developing an evaluation framework so that we can demonstrate impact around this effort. We've been fortunate enough that Sobrato Philanthropies has reached out to us, and they're very interested in supporting us with the evaluation framework to be able to fund whatever element that looks like as we continue to design this. So we're very excited about that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Blue Zones. If you haven't seen Blue Zone on Netflix, check it out. But the city, in partnership with the county, is going to be doing a Blue Zone readiness assessment. And the 9 pillars of Blue Zones is very much in line with what we envision for the Children's Services Master Plan. So again, there's a lot of opportunity for alignment and to be able to leverage kind of that name recognition of Blue Zones. We will continue to do work around the demonstration pilot sites. A key piece, as I mentioned, is ensuring that we have youth and family at the table throughout this design and implementation process. We're actually in the process right now of securing funding to be able to provide stipends for youth and for families, because we want to make sure that we're honoring their time. And then, as mentioned, through our teaming structure, ensuring that we're convening our different design and implementation teams. We know sustainability is important. Again, this is not just a city effort. We want to make sure that this is embedded in the community. And so to do this, we need to make sure that we have the funding and the resources to be able to continue this beyond 1 year. And so we've already started doing some fund development, going out, identifying some grant opportunities, and we will continue to do that. And then reporting structure and process is identifying a process to be able to come back to organizations and commissions and bodies such as you, the Youth Commission, the Library Education Commission, to come and give you updates and again, be able to get input and feedback. So next slide. And that's the end of our presentation. Again, we want to thank the Library and Parks, Recreation and Neighborhood Services for all of their input and feedback throughout this entire process. The Youth Commission for allowing me to come and present to you at every meeting and just being great partners throughout this entire process. And as well as the Library and Education Commission for allowing us to come and provide ongoing input and feedback. So that's the end of the presentation. Did you want to give any? Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll now move as your name is called, please proceed to this location for mic access.
You can go, Cassie. I'm Meredith. Corinne. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Meredith Curry Nunez, and I'm a member of California's Cradle to Career Data System Community Engagement Advisory Board. I'm also the leader of the Northern California College Promise Coalition. We are a network of over 60 organizations, and I want to acknowledge that the San Jose Public Library was a co-founder of our coalition, and I'm so excited for their leadership on this project. Our coalition envisions a world where every student, regardless of background, has the opportunity to pursue higher education and achieve economic prosperity. And as a resident of East San Jose and a graduate of Piedmont Hills High School in Eastside Union High School District, I really am proud and honored to be here and witnessing what we're doing together today around the Children and Youth Service Master Plan. And I'm advocating for it to be student and equity centered in all the ways that we can achieve that. I recommend that when considering data, leveraging the California Cradle to Career Data System and the dashboards they're building with metrics around early education, college and career readiness, transfer outcomes, financial aid, employment outcomes, and also teacher training and retention. To help students access meaningful opportunities after high school that they can afford, we encourage the city to leverage the CalKids statewide child savings account program. There are accounts available right now for newborns and for low-income 1st through 12th graders to help students afford to go to college. I also encourage the city to leverage collaboratives like the Bay Area K-16 Collaborative, who has a piece of their work focused right here in San Jose. Last, I encourage that schools consider leveraging free tools. The libraries can leverage this too, like californiacolleges.edu, which is available to students as early as middle school to build their college knowledge, develop a financial aid plan, and start exploring careers that students can dream of and aim for. Thank you so much for your work on this master plan, and the coalition is ready to be of service to support the implementation. Thank you.
And that's the only public comment.
Right, so if the public comment portion comes to a close, we'll open the. With the public comment portion coming to a close, we will call to open the LEC and YC joint discussion. We'll start with a question from either commission. Yep.
Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to note that in lieu of big packets of paper for the full master plan document, we do have a QR code, which Carla is going to circulate. We'll give you access to the full document so that you can have every single word.
Thank you. Question. Start Commissioner Brown and then Commissioner Mahaney.
So I found a lot of the information in the report. Oh, am I not loud enough? Okay.
Red light.
I found a lot of the data in this very sobering. And I really appreciate the support and thoroughness of it and you can see the impact of the community. I love how centered we are being. The fact that, 40% of San Jose residents are foreign born, I think speaks to the fact that we really need to make sure with all this going out that the communication is intentional. I hear this a lot as an advocate in special education and in the American education system, how baffling it is when a family shows up to school the first day and expects their kid to walk right into kindergarten and they're asked that you haven't registered, what are you doing here? To flip that, and how did we miss you? Because we really should have registered your child. And, to just make sure that our communication is in their face. I know that Anaheim is just trying to get information out about special education, went to the trouble to print up placemats at restaurants. So I would love to see information blasted on billboards at every bus stop, anywhere that information is easily seen by the communities that we're reaching out to. But thank you, this is wonderful, thank you.
Okay, thank you as well. I've been following along and participating. So again, it's the huge, big lift to think about systems change of all the partners. And the work of including all of the folks is just tremendous. So you have my utmost, respect and really just knowing that your heart, all of your hearts are in this all the way, and leveraging pieces that are already done. I mean, I think it's frustrating when there's all these pieces that it doesn't get leveraged. So using the work that the library has done and the commission has worked on around all the age ranges and all the specifics is super helpful. So I just have a couple of questions about how. So moving into phase 3 implementation or beginning implementation. It seems to me, as you know, but for the group, that all the places when you do a systems approach, all the system partners have different things like tools, like software systems, like data collection services. How, knowing that you're going to have a model that really looks at whole comprehensive child and family, and you're going to be touching 10 systems, let's say, I don't know how many, because I didn't count that. How and what resource will be needed to make sure that you're either streamlining and or working with these multiple systems to take data back and forth for the works? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Yes. We would be naive to say it's not going to be daunting. So there's a couple of things, and we've already started these conversations. As I mentioned, we've been fortunate that Sobrato Philanthropies has really leaned in. And we're just kind of in that stage right now where we're just talking and kind of figuring out, okay, how do we make all of this happen? We've also been very fortunate in that we have community partners already at the table. We've been meeting since September, along with city staff. We have the county, school districts, community-based organizations, et cetera. And so we have already started thinking about what could this look like. It's still too early for us to get into the details, but yes, we recognize that we'll need to figure out, is there some kind of universal data system, right? The other piece also just kind of out here to think about is that the county is being mandated by the state and by the federal government to make sure that community is at the table in their design process to reduce the number of families and youth that enter the system, right? Child welfare, juvenile probation, that kind of thing. And so they're very interested as well in working with us at these demonstration sites to think about how do we create like a universal intake form, right? Where we're all collecting the data that we all are interested in. And then again, also thinking about where do we put a lot of all of that data in, right? And then how do we evaluate impact? So very new conversations, very recent, but yes, it's not lost on us that there is work to be done. Again, we're fortunate that we have Survivor Philanthropies. They have San Jose State on board. They have Stanford on board. So my hope is all of these smart people will help us kind of figure it out with all of us, right? And so more to come, but we'll definitely make sure that we update you as part of that process. I don't know if you want to.
Thank you. So these are just going to follow on these pieces
Yeah.
because it's exactly the same train of what's to come, because you've been doing so much work and thinking on how. And so even in, I think, Laura, we know like at First Five, we worked in a collaborative around universal data with Berkeley and with 3 counties, and the issue that our own county had around sharing data and HIPAA in some cases. So there is some work out there. I know First Five has it and the county has it too, and where they got stuck. So you don't have to do the beginning maybe, but figure out how to get unstuck would be useful. And so then that leads to thinking about what happens to people who are already in the system, like librarians, assistant librarians, parks and recreation leaders, who don't know anything about housing or who don't know anything about early care and education in the sense of what's going on with TK. Are you thinking with them around retraining, or is it adding staff, or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Wendy, because you were actually at the first meeting, and I think pretty much for this the entire process. Yeah, as we're approaching this work, the one thing we realize that we know that almost 99.9% of the time with these type of collective impact efforts, the problem almost is always data sharing, right? So one of the things that we've been kind of really looking at is not necessarily, although we're leading with data to understand what we're solving for, we're not gonna let data be the only driver or determinant for success, right? So the approach that we're going to take early on is, yes, we will be working, thankfully Sobrato has stepped up and said, hey, we will fund the evaluation methodology, whatever that is, we will do that. And so that's, we got their commitment, so I think that's going to be good. But we're starting with, when you take a look at this framework, kind of start and meet organizations where they are, right? And we're asking every organization to basically map their service delivery model, whatever it is, to this framework. And then we start there. And then we start looking at how do we move the needle with the youth and families that we're working with. And then let's build a evaluation and data sharing tool around it versus the other way around. Oftentimes we try to force kind of our programs into some evidence-based practice that somebody in Boston did, or, and it just, it just drives everybody nuts and definitely scares half the room away, right? So we are gonna, we definitely are committed to following data approaches, but we can't let that be the sole determinant. Otherwise, we'll never move on this.
Perfect. And the last one is, and I know you're already thinking about it, but will be really interested to see what you come up that says this is successful. What does success look like for the pilots that says, yep, we can invest and go further, and then further and further to full implementation? What will be the marks that said, yeah, this is where it said we're moving? Probably you don't know yet all of it, but I certainly know it's something you have to keep your eye on.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we're gonna start with the ones that we know are significant indicators of future success, right? If you're in preschool, are you learning ready for kindergarten? You know, starting there, right? And making sure that's, you know, that we get as many young people that are in that pipeline ready for kindergarten. And if they're not, we do some immediate intervention, right? As you go up the ladder, you know, A through G requirements, making sure people are meeting those, right? And seeing this is also where we as a city are kind of like gonna be needing to change the way we do our work, because we don't really think A to G requirements at the city, right? We're thinking, hey, Parks and Rec, community center, you know, sports and recreation and after school programming. Well, now we're basically saying, hey, now we got a map to how do we support young people in achieving those, right? If we're gonna move the needle. And then all the way up to, for example, if we notice early signs of, for example, gang involvement, you know, in the area of intervention, right? The sooner we catch that, the sooner we could intervene and redirect that behavior, right? And then even to the point where, say, somebody is actually incarcerated, right? Well, we don't just give up there. Then we say, okay, how then do we work with Javier Aguirre over at the reentry program over at the county? And begin to actually go into the jails and offer some other alternatives to, hey, look, you know, you got this path, or you can have this path, and we're here to help you. And you know, so it's really taking a granular, commonsensical approach, and then developing our methodology around it, right? So what I think, you know, our goal is to use a heck of a lot of common sense, right? And sprinkle it with some evidence-based practices.
That's just a comment, is that it's smart that you did all the partnering early on, because that's gonna play out everywhere you go later. So for example, County Office of Ed just finished their kindergarten readiness for this cohort, and only 37% of our kindergartners are ready. And so that's a marker that certainly you have as a partner already on board to help work through it. So I thank you very, very, very much.
I was just gonna mention also, just as an example to what Angel was mentioning, yesterday I was in a meeting with the San Jose Youth Empowerment Alliance strategic plan staff and community partners, talking about how do we measure success, academic success for children, primarily middle school and early high school, so like 9th, 10th grade. And so again, a lot of the same conversations and challenges and barriers that they're discussed in the master plan, right? So again, there's that opportunity to leverage that partnership and kind of that collective minds to really figure out that this is not just a master plan item or priority area, but it is a priority area in an item that other entities or collectives or collaboratives are working on as well.
Other comments from the commission, either commission? Please, from the district court.
Yeah, look. Hi, I'm T. Lung. I am District 4's Youth Commissioner. We were talking about public schools, and I think that that's a place I really want to focus on, like especially as a youth, because it's so important to our personal development. And a hole I see in the master plan, or something that I just haven't seen as I've read through like Appendix 2, is emphasizing the importance of like retaining cultural diversity in schools, and specifically implementing more dual immersion language programs within schools across San Jose. I'm a really big proponent of dual immersion language programs. I just went back to my alma mater in Berryessa, Cherrywood, and they implemented a Mandarin language program, immersion program, which I thought was really, really cool. And I'm seeing youth benefit directly from that, and seeing also the statistical evidence that shows us, you know, how it increases graduation rates in high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, how it helps people feel more confident in their cultural identity, is something that I think should really be at least addressed in the master plan. I know, like, I'm sure some organizations work in it. And I know the districts like do prioritize that, but I think emphasizing that could be a really cool thing to do.
That's great. That was great.
Thank you for the feedback.
Hello, I'm Commissioner Look of another Commissioner Look, but of District 7. And following what my fellow Commissioner Bloom said about public schools, I think something specific is the lack of a safety net. And I know you guys discussed this in terms of working with different systems and partners, and you listed school districts in there. But as I've went through my year and I talked to different student groups, it was really concerning to see how when students, like one student I talked to actually encountered harassment by a teacher, nothing was done when asked solutions. They still had to see that teacher every day. Re-traumatization was an issue. That teacher was engaging in really inappropriate behavior and nothing was done. And when she went to another teacher to ask and talk about the crisis, they said, I'm really uncomfortable. I don't want to help you. And practically, that was just incredibly discouraging to hear. I think at the beginning of the year, I really wanted to explore training for staff in terms of dealing with gender violence, sexual violence, and all sorts of uncomfortable things that teachers and students might come towards them and ask help for, because that's not usually their main job. And that's understandable, but when students look for help, it really does stop at the school level. And it's sad to see, because I know you list a bunch of systems and safety nets that you guys work with. And I'm learning more about these various services, but a lot of students stop at the school level. And once their teachers say they won't help them, they feel like there's no hope. So I would explore more at the school district level. I know these are two different systems, USMSA and education, but yeah, it's really a crisis. And I did want to talk about another thing, and I saw that urban villages, this is a pivot, but urban villages was mentioned twice in this, and I think that's really cool, especially since our deputy city manager mentioned how coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of social isolation. And a lot of that is not just the effects of the pandemic, but the way our city is built. We have a lack of interconnected and affordable options for students to really facilitate social interaction, feel healthy in terms of their relationships. And that's because transportation, by default, you have to drive, and not every person can drive. Walking, using bike, or even VTAs, not the defaults. And yeah, there's not that many options if you want to hang out with someone and not pay like $10 for a drink or like nearly $20 for a meal. And sometimes it's just the way we build our urban villages, or like these mixed use areas, right? So hopefully we can work with Blue Zones more, to see where we can go in terms of developing something that is really building community physically. And I think that would be a very obvious change too, like an obvious big development if we push towards opening urban villages. I know there was a few, like one in Allen Rock that's in the process of being built, but if we speed that up, we can make like the fabric of San Jose look so much more diverse in terms of downtown, right? Like creating little downtowns across all of San Jose. I think that would be really cool to see in a couple of years.
Well, I see a future city planning director. Oh, that's, we're gonna be in good hands here. Now, refreshment, you and I spoke at the Blue Zones meeting.
That is correct.
That's right, yeah. She was, I was telling on you, she took me to task. She said, I haven't seen you at any youth commission meeting. So I am here, just for the record. So I did my homework, you did your job, and but I want to speak briefly on the first part, because those are kind of the issues that always fly under the radar, right? Because it's easier to capture more systemic, type things, some of your traditional themes and trends. But when you look at one of the guiding values here, and one of my personal favorites is the second one around cross-sector collaboration, investment, and accountability. That third piece here, accountability, really is intended to address those type of issues, right? Is how do we hold one another accountable for our investment in our work with young people, right? I remember when once upon, I was young at one time, long time ago, but I was young. And, you know, I remember feeling a little sense of hopelessness, well, you know, here's what I have to say, or like, let's say, you know, I remember like literally walking across the street, going to a friend's house, which was over in the Evergreen area, and coming back home and asking my dad, how come our streets are smaller and our lights are broken and their streets are wider and really nice? You know, I just had the question. I didn't really understand the dynamic, right? But back to the accountability pieces, how do we hone in on those things? Because we've seen that, you know, the right word from the right person to the right, you know, can literally be transformative in someone's life. And, you know, as I talked earlier about, you know, our goal is to try to, you know, turn this hope switch on. The hope switch can easily be turned off with that type of behavior that you mentioned, right? And so we got to be mindful of that. I think you got to help us better understand that, to put this into practice, because I think, you know, we'll need to understand it more to kind of solve for it. So maybe we could talk a little bit more, you know, offline. Maybe Laura can follow up, but it would be good to kind of capture that a little bit more directly in this document.
Other questions from submission? All right, so a lot of my fellow youth commission colleagues mentioned schools, right? It's the place that young people probably spend more time other than their homes and their rooms playing games. So my question is, you know, the city and the county and the city and the schools, they're partners, right? To create more accessibility and to fill in the gaps that education faces, you know, the city steps into that. So my question is, there's still that gap, right? That there is efforts to close it with, you know, the schools, the city school collaborative, but what steps can schools and the city take that, you know, may not be present now to make sure that these services are accessible down to those students?
Yeah, you know, yeah. You know, you raise a great point, because one of the goals in this plan is to connect not only the right systems, but the right people in the systems, right? And I'll give you a real example that just happened just recently. We have some funding to serve young people for their first time job. And oftentimes when these opportunities come up, you know, somebody at the city will call somebody and say, hey, we got 50 jobs for young people. And then they call whoever they know at the school district. And then we get 50 kids and we fill the slots and good. It's a good program, and it's, you know, and we kind of move on. But we're missing an opportunity there, especially if here's an opportunity to provide some additional work experience, some additional income to some of the kids who really are on the bubble, right? Who are really like, man, I just need a job. You know, no one's hiring, you know, I'm applying at Taco Bell, different places, nobody's hiring me. And they just need that little, you know, just that little break, right? And so one of the things we did with Eastside is we called them, we said, look, we got these jobs, we got these slots, but we don't want them to go to just anybody. We want them to go to young people that really need it. People that are like really trying hard in school, but are struggling. People who kind of just need a chance. And the superintendent basically said, I'll tell you what, let me find those people for you. He turned around, reached into the system, came back with a list, and I'll tell you what, these were the exact young people that we needed, right? So we need to make that kind of the practice in terms of the way we do work. It's not enough for us to say, oh, I talked to, you know, superintendent so-and-so, I talked to, you know, we got to get past the superficialities of partnership and really get down to, okay, you know, what we have in common is how are we collectively driving this? The other thing is how do we do it in a way, and Wendy, you kind of mentioned this around leverage. You know, oftentimes what happens is that we become what we feel we need to become as a system to meet the need that we're trying to solve, right? And so what we've been talking about is like, look, the city shouldn't have to become a school. The school shouldn't have to become the city. We shouldn't have to become the county. How do we show up as we are with the resources that we have and then leverage and link our resources together in a way so that everybody is in their lane, but it's connected, right? So then that way, a teacher who has been skilled and trained to teach doesn't have to become a social worker, or doesn't have to become, you name the position, right? So that's part of the work that's inherent in this, and part of the conversations that we've been having cross system, right? Because look, this is not the first time that someone has come up with the idea of cross-sector collaboration, right? It's probably one of the oldest ideas in the books, but if we're going to be truthful, we haven't done it effectively. And our goal is to try to achieve that to the extent possible.
Thank you. And I think that leads me to another question. It's gonna lead to more questions. But I like that you mentioned, adding more roles on teachers, for example, right? Teachers have a lot on their plate, and we see it every day, right? We see it every day. And I'm wondering with this plan, if that aspect and that example of coming from a teacher adding more roles, what effect does this children and youth master plan have on city staff? Because, there is already so much that is on them in terms of pressure. And then with a budget shortfall coming up next year, right? What does that look like for staff, and how can, I guess I'll stop there.
Jill, do you want to take that one? I'm happy to take it, but I just.
How this would work with cities. I can speak to city staff. I think that maybe we could also talk about teachers as our partners. I think that one of the exciting outcomes of this framework of the master plan, which Angel had held up, is that it already creates a structure that incorporates a lot of the priority work that we've already done, that as a commission and our Library and Education Commission have already spoken to and given feedback on. The structure of our work in early childhood development and preparation by kindergarten, the structure of our work on reading by third grade and math by third grade, the structure of the college and career readiness programs and youth empowerment programs. Somebody here needs to talk about environmental and the built environment, by the way. But anyway, and the impact on community. But it actually encompasses and gives a framework that provides a way to make sure that those priorities have a place within a broader structure. And then it's about ensuring, as Angel said, that if every entity is actually mapping to the same structure, we'll find natural alignments and places to leverage strength without creating more work. So to me, I actually see it as a way for us to hone down the work that we do, say, as a large library department who works with the educational partners, to hone down on the programs that are the most impactful and the most aligned with our partners in the schools, for instance, or partners in the early care space. I'm actually looking forward to it as a way to really focus and not just add on more, as you were saying, because I think that's the temptation and that's the risk, honestly. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I'm glad that Angel could hear it as well.
No, that's a great spot. Yeah, that's spot on. So agree.
I think I could just add, maybe from a community perspective, just because we have been having so many conversations with community external partners, is that, for example, a school, yes, teachers are overwhelmed, right? And administrators are overwhelmed and sometimes don't always know who are all those different service providers. And so I feel that we're also able to bridge some of those conversations to say, schools, you don't have to have all of these services available on the campus. Yes, it would be great, right? But that's not always going to happen. And so how do we make sure that we're developing those relationships, as Angel mentioned, to those experts in the community who can help support their students, right? So that they're not carrying all the burden or leaving it up to the young person or the families to blindly kind of figure out where those services are.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. I think, this is great what you guys have put together and you've really covered a lot of ground. I mean, it is 164 pages, but so my question really was that, and I think Commissioner Brown was also discussing this earlier with the impediments that we're facing with education. In terms of like expediting this educational readiness aspect to this, is there any way that we can harness the technological aspect of Silicon Valley, like the AI-based companies, and kind of directing aid towards students should they need it?
Yeah, one of the stakeholder groups that you probably have noticed is kind of absent here is the private sector, right? But I'll tell you, that's not gonna be for too long, because we have been reaching out to private sector. We've been meeting with different CEOs from high tech, and was having a conversation with a group of tech executives about this plan, right? Because oftentimes when you reach out to the private sector, usually they'll say, "Hey, I'd like to invest, but I want to see a plan. I want to see the skeptic in me kind of says that's kind of an excuse to say no, right? And in some ways they get away with it, right? Because we oftentimes don't have a plan. So we've been having a conversation with them around this, and I remember making this comment to one group, and I said, "Look, Silicon Valley for many young people in San Jose might as well be on the East Coast, because there's no pipeline that leads from where they are to Silicon Valley, and it's this close. I mean, it's literally 10 miles away, right? So how do we bridge that, right? And it has to be more than a t-shirt and a slice of pizza. Come to my thing, let's do the Twitter or what it's called now, the X. Take a quick picture and all that. We need more substance, right? And I think AI presents a good opportunity among other type of things. So we do have a group of tech execs and other private sector execs that have agreed to lean in on this work. And one of the iterations that you'll see is exploring more along those lines. I don't have much more to present at this point, other than they're really excited about what they're seeing, because they're saying, hey, we can actually, this is, you could look at this document kind of from a do what's right perspective, or you could also look at it from an economic development perspective around this. Just makes good business sense, right? And so as we're talking with some of these individuals, that's kind of how we're pitching it, right? It's like, look, our focus is going to be on working on building tomorrow's workforce, but you on your end have to be there to kind of receive them, and not just with entry-level jobs, but with high-paying jobs, right? So more to come on that.
All right, yeah, thank you. That answers.
I also just wanted to add that the library is also leading work around creating college and career pathways. And so I know Amanda Ott has been hosting community forums, youth forums around that work. So I'm sure there'll be more work that'll be presented to you in the future.
Hi, thank you. First off, I'd like to thank you, Laura, for coming and presenting to us twice. It was really great, and I learned something new each time. And I wanted to hit on a point which you brought up earlier, which was that, for example, when children in the libraries and library staff that identify that the children needs help outside, that they can go ahead and do so. And so I wanted to flip it to the other side, and how youth can get help. And so I wanted to learn more about how the plan potentially plans on empowering youth to come forward with their issues. And I know this might be difficult to answer, but sometimes youth might look at the plan and go, oh, well, I don't think I qualify, or will I get the help that I need, or how will I get the help that I need? Will my family be involved? And so I wanted to know how the plan includes the dissemination of the information that, look, this is what you're going through, and this is how you can get help. And so sometimes youth aren't so forthcoming. They might receive issues, and they might have barriers into getting into the plan themselves. And so I want to know how the plan empowers you to come forward themselves, rather than having potentially staff or providers have the information and then address issues with the youth themselves, instead of having, sorry. The question is, how can youth themselves come forward and present the issues?
Thank you. So we have had just preliminary discussion with our community partners and our city staff, a lot of it is around relationship building, right? And whether you have a relationship with another young person, your peer, or an adult, that could be a family member or an adult in the library or a school advisor, right? It's about relationship building. And so one of the things that we have discussed already is that we should have opportunities for young people to be mentors themselves to each other, right? So that they're developing those relationships with their peers to be able to say, hey, if you have an issue or you have a concern, this is where you can go, right? Because we know that that's important, but then also, that's the importance of having youth at the table throughout the design and delivery, right? So that we can hear from you. I hate to say this, but we didn't have the internet growing up, right? And so your approach to how you access and disseminate information is very different from what, I hate to say it, but many of us here, many of us experience, right? And so we need to hear from you. You need to be part of that process to help us figure out how is the best way to connect with young people, and how is that information delivered, and what kind of language, right? There's the diversity of language, but then also language that makes sense to a young person. How I speak is very different from how you speak to each other, right? And so it's making sure that we're sensitive to that. And so again, making sure that young people are part of that process.
Yeah, can I add one thing to that too? It's also the message, right? I was kind of flashing back as you were asking that question and I was listening to Laura's response. I remember there was a City of San Jose Parks and Rec staff person by the name of Danny Lopez. I still remember his name. And he knew that me and my friends were up to no good. He showed up at my house, which was across the street, as I mentioned earlier, and he knocks and my mom answers and I'm thinking, oh man, I'm busted now, because I'm thinking, okay, he's going to snitch on something because he knows exactly what we've been up to. And he asked my mom only spoke Spanish. So, he was bilingual. So he was talking and then he was speaking kind of broken English, broken Spanish. And I thought, well, maybe I could just trick my mom here. But his approach was interesting because he goes, I'm starting a leadership program and I think your son would make a good leader. And I'm listening to this, I'm kind of eavesdropping, right? I'm listening to this and really what it was a program for kids that were making bad decisions that just needed some, some guidance, right? But he didn't come and say, hey, your son's making some bad decisions. We got a program for bad kids. He said, your son has leadership potential and his friends. And then, and that program was called Leadership in Action. That was a game changer in my life because at that point, what it did was I learned about oh, wait a minute, I can actually do some pretty cool things. But I'm going to need to make better decisions, and so how we message to young people too, I think is going to be very important. I don't think we can sell this and the type of services that we're hoping to provide as here's remedial program or this is what's going to fix you, but rather back to the hope piece. How can we rekindle some hope around what do you want to do? What are you interested in? And how can we help you get there, right? And cost shouldn't be an issue. Access shouldn't be an issue. That's where all of us adults need to kind of come in and invest, right? To help make that happen. But I just wanted to add that other piece. And now framing that messaging, we also know that youth, communicating to youth is also more effective, right? You're going to listen to each other before you're going to listen to us, right? And so we got to find a way to also incorporate that into the way we do this work, if we're going to do it right.
Other questions?
I think we were talking a little bit earlier about access to information and how youth need to have access to information. And I think we all know this already, but the digital divide is such a big problem. And I see that in my own district. And I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about that because I work with my youth advisory council, right? A group of 19 youth from Piedmont Hills High School and also Independence High School. And one of my YAC members does not have access to a computer. He's a high school senior. He has, I think, just been working on his phone for the entire year or the entire like past 4 years. He uses his school Chromebook. So I wonder if there are ways to more effectively partner with schools to provide kids who don't have access to computers at home or like electronics at home to have that access, right? Because I think like having that is like the first step to anything else, to accessing mental health services, to accessing their homework, to career development, to academic development, to all those other things. That was not really a question, but that was my take on that. I had that comment and I had a secondary one too, sort of on art and the role that it plays in youth development, and how we can further integrate it into the Children and Youth Master Plan. I think I was reading through it and I see, various community organizations that work in the arts. But I would really love to see more of an emphasis, more partnership with specifically youth arts organizations around San Jose, looking into that, seeing how we can really build a community where youth are encouraged to be creative. Because I think, number one, art is a really great outlet for youth to get out of other activities that, are less productive or antisocial. And number two, my perspective on art in San Jose right now is that it is a space of privilege. It's something you can access if you have the time to, the space to, the ability to go outside of school to. So I would love to see, more effective integration of arts into schools, creating communities for youth to be involved. I currently serve as Santa Clara County's Youth Poet Laureate. That's something that we're trying to do is like engage youth, but we really struggle with number one, funding and like connecting with schools, connecting with arts programs within schools. And then also just trying to like create a centralized community where you feel like they can be accepted in a place that isn't at home, that isn't, at school, where they're able to be civically engaged or just.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Sorry about the coffee, guys. I have really bad allergies. But anyway, I wanted to thank you, Ms. Guzzo, for all of your consistent support throughout the year, as well as last year. And I'm really grateful for for Angel Reyes and Laura Guzzo's team and your advocacy for youth and our well-being.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Commissions?
Hi, I'm Commissioner Reyes. So I want to add on to Commissioner Brown earlier, she mentioned about special ed. So my thing is, I'm being thankful that you're going to support early childhood education program. But I think it's important also to partner with mental health support because in my own personal experience, there's a lot of children, especially during the pandemic until now, that every classroom that I observe, there's a lot of children with challenging behavior. They don't have a special ed, but they have a challenging behavior. Sometimes the parents struggling, especially here in East Side San Jose, because I live in this area, they didn't know what going to do. So I think that's one of the things that we need to focus because if the kid cannot able to regulate themselves, how they can go to the kindergarten. So I think starting with early intervention because sometimes it takes time for the school district to give them support and resources because it takes time, a lot of waiting there right now. So I think if we can include that early intervention, especially for the children home, especially for the immigrant family that didn't know what to do and where to go. And the other one, the homeless family. And I have a family that I met 2 weeks ago. They live in a car, they live in a store in a Walmart area that didn't know what to do. So I think I know we have some program in our library about homelessness, but we want to make sure if one of the important because we know the young children is very important. And the family that I met, they have 2 years old, they have 10 years old and 13 years old. Until now, I still live in I reached out to some part of our city, but they didn't have response yet. So I think that's another part that we include because we want to give opportunity to everyone. Even though they're immigrant, no matter what their status, I think that's very important. So, but I'm pretty thankful because of this one, there's a hope and there's opportunity to everybody. including from zero to going to adulthood. So I think important for me right now to have mental health support for the early childhood education, at the same time to get a project for people experiencing homelessness. And the third one, I know we have a lot of program for the childcare for the low income families. How about for the working families? Because those working families, they're not eligible and they're spending a lot of money. And that one of my experience back then, because I'm working and I live with those things. So I bring back my child home in the Philippines in order for me to work here. So that's another experience that we need to give opportunity not only for the low income, also include the working families and middle class families.
Thank you.
You raised three really like wicked problems, right? And, you know, starting with mental health, you know, Laura mentioned the county has been a partner at the table since day one. So we actually have a standing meeting with all the county department heads that touch the space, including behavioral health, among others. And we have their commitment to basically take their programming and their funding and align it to this. So I think there's going to be, I think that's pretty hopeful in terms of some things that happen. On the homeless front, you know, there's McKinney-Vento funding, right? That school districts typically administer. And it's tough to administer because it's money, but it's usually not enough money to solve a problem, right? So in some ways, school districts are kind of in a tough place because like they really can't solve it, but there is some funding. So what we've been talking about is how can we leverage McKinney-Vento funding in a more coordinated manner, right? So the city is moving forward really big on homelessness. The county is doing the same. So how can we leverage those three funding sources to then make a greater impact on families, right? So that's the preliminary, you know, thinking. And in terms of working families, you're absolutely right. We heard loud and clear, you know, and it's one of our, it rose to one of our strategic goal areas. And they didn't define it so much as homelessness. They defined it as, hey, I'm actually living in a house, but I'm not so sure I could stay. You know, I'm worried about my ability to keep this house, right? Whether it's through renting or whether they're owners. And so there was the anxiety associated with housing security, right? So that's a piece that we need to tackle. You know, in San Jose, you know, one of the commissioners mentioned, you know, San Jose being a place of privilege and affluency, and that is a true statement. It's also the home of over 150,000 households that earn less than 35,000 a year. You know, I do the math, I do the mental math on that, and I have, you know, we do a lot of numbers at the city, you know, Jill and Laura can attest enough. I can't wrap my head around a household, 35,000, that's below the poverty. And even when you apply what they call kind of the AGI, I mean, there's no room there for anything fun or even like savings, not to mention college or things like that, right? So those are the things that we got to solve for. And we know that this plan in and of itself will not necessarily solve that directly, but our hope is that we frame the issue and then we convene the right people to kind of say, how do we get people on a track to be so that they can upskill their working skills, right? So if you're earning $15 an hour or whatever you're earning, how can we get some additional training to you so that you could upskill and then eventually, you know, increase your earning power, right? But this is a long game. Sure. Yeah, it's a tough one.
I wanted to circle back to mental health because we are lacking a lot in this area. When families reach out to me and say, my child needs residential, there's nothing here. When I hear 5150 and the child is 7 years old and put in with adults in a very scary space, there's nothing here. So as we look at these plans, I just want to make sure that we're also looking at what scaffolding needs to be in place. What do we need to really hold and carry these families? Along that line, earlier you talked about making sure of kindergarten readiness and doing that pre-screening. There really needs to be the learning disabilities screening as well. Changing child find to child found. When I hear about programs in New York, they are looking at kindergartners. They have psychologists down the playground watching how their social interaction is, and they're testing their fine motor and gross motor skills as part of determining the readiness. I think of Tiffany Maciel's report on juvenile, in the system and how many of them had learning disabilities that have gone unidentified. So it needs to be a component of that. And then, I'll circle back to just making sure that we're explaining the American systems that we're putting these, consistently with all the different cultures that we are embracing in our community. I'll just keep hitting that one. I hear a lot about it. Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Commissioner, Reyes mentioned something that kind of ticked the light bulb. And maybe, the two perfect people in the room that can kind of address this, is you two, right? So growing up in Overfelt, these are great resources. We probably need them. We do. But there's also behavior in Eastside that's unique to communities like Eastside. I think our interactions with others is not like the interactions that we have normally outside when working in workplaces, for example, in the city of San Jose. The language that I use to communicate with my colleagues on the commission is not the language that I communicate with when talking to my peers at Overfelt, right? So my question is, how do we break that barrier, right? To say that, these resources are here for you. How do we frame it in a way where people from communities like Eastside can say, wow, like this is meant for me, and this is something that, I could be a benefit to. Kind of.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the kind of the earlier comment around how do we connect young people to identify what, an issue or need or supports that they need, is really, again, making sure that we have community part of the design process, right? The language we use as city staff is going to be very different from what an educator uses, or a mom or a dad or a young person. And so again, is making sure that we have families and young people at the design process to be able to say, oh yeah, you can't use that word here, right? Because it means something else. Or if you want people to understand the service, you need to explain it in this way or call it this way, right? And it continues to be a learning process. Just about a week ago, we were meeting with Catholic Charities, and they were very adamant about not using the word navigator. And they said, because people don't understand what that means, right? The county may have a meaning and a definition and understand what navigators mean, but a community member will not, right? Or it just means something maybe negative. So again, it's just making sure that young people and families are at the table designing and informing us. I mean, and part of it is us appearing at those meetings and having those conversations in an authentic way, right? And not taking it personally to think that we come with all of the answers, but we're here to also learn from community and learn from each other. So again, I think that goes back to the guiding values is just showing up and being present and being open to those conversations and seeking those opportunities to learn.
In my opinion, the reality is that your generation really holds the best answer to that question, because it's going to take young people being courageous to model a different way, right? Growing up in East Side, I'll tell you this, I have never met a gang member. When you ask them and you say, hey, do you want your brother or sister to be a gang member? They'll say, hell no, I'll beat them up, blah, blah, blah. But yet it's okay for that person to be a gun, and I always try to understand, like, well, why is it okay for you, but you don't want this for your brother or sister? Because they know what it costs. They know what they're losing, right? So it's going to take young people to model a different way, right? And so our job is to kind of create opportunity pathways for young people, right? Not to make decisions or choices for you, but to say, look, here's the menu of options. It's your decision which road you want to take, right? But then as you're on that road, to also then not just hang around with other people that have just made the decision, but to also look around and say, hey, who's missing out here? Who's missing around here? Because everyone is watching. Young people, think about your own, think about yourselves at school. You guys are what, you guys know everything that's going on. You guys know what those kids are doing, what those folks are doing, and so people, and they're watching too. And people are always, but they don't always feel like they have I've seen him, he's a smart guy, man. I don't know how he does that. I've seen his papers, and I can't write like him. Those are the ones that need somebody to pull up on them and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, let me meet you where you are and let me help you one step at a time. And that makes a huge difference. And I would never underestimate the power that of peer-to-peer influence. But right now, culturally, and even in the East Side, that's the East Side culture, you kind of gravitate to the groups that you have because you got to kind of protect who you want to become. We're going to have to confront some of those habits and norms and change them. But you guys are in a better position to change them than us.
Thank you for spinning the wheels on me.
Before I call for an entertainment of emotions, I want to say thank you. I know our council members shared about our rich history, but this report also, I forgot about that.
This report also calls out the challenges of our history in our city, and the intent and the intentionality of this and the need for this. And just shouting out, it calls out things like redlining, and it's just historical intentional choices that folks have done. So thank you for that. And I also forgot to say, shout out to the Youth Commission.
Yeah.
Like, y'all. I have a little brother going into his first year of high school, and I'm like writing things down and be like, dude, step it up. We got some work to do. But thank you again for the robust presentation. Thank you for commissioners for the great questions and comments. I will turn it over to our library commission, and I will entertain a motion for us to approve the commission chair to issue a letter to the city council that summarizes public comment and commission feedback. We have a motion from, I saw Commissioner Allen, second from Commissioner Mahaney-Guru. Any discussion?
I just want to say thank you again, and also appreciate everyone's comments. The one thing I do hope that we as the Library Commission will share with the council on this is the fact that we heard so much about the richness of this area, right? And the fact that, just like you said, we call out redlining. We don't have to really say that, but poverty is a policy choice. And this has been a place that has been historically disinvested. So we really need the council to really dig in and invest in the planning, invest in the implementation, and figure out how they can make it happen, right? I mean, we have all these indicators. What does it mean? Someone will say, oh my God, you guys got so much money. Yeah, well, we started from like 10 feet behind everyone else. So I hope that we can do that when we submit that to the council. Thank you.
Other comments? Any other comments from commission? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 8-0, and I'll pass it over to our youth commission.
Thank you. So, in response to our presentation, do we have a motion to approve for the commission chair to issue a letter to city council?
Motion to draft.
All in favor? Any against? Any abstention?
All right, y'all. So with that, we'll adjourn our library commission meeting at 7:57. Turn it over to you.
Then the youth commission will adjourn at 7:57 p.m. We now invite all commissioners, city staff, and members of the public to go up to the screen and take a group photo. Thank you.
Thank you.